A dam looks like it's holding back water. It isn't. It's holding back weight. Millions, sometimes billions of tons of it, leaning on a single wall, every second, forever. I'm an architect, and when you stack water this high, it stops behaving like a view and starts behaving like a force of nature you've trapped. It pushes back hard enough to need a mountain. It tries to lift the wall off the ground. It gets heavy enough to set off earthquakes. And in one case, heavy enough to nudge the spin of the whole planet. These are the dams holding back impossible volumes of water, and the genuinely disturbing things all that water does. The heaviest things we've ever stacked in one place. And what the water does once it's up there. Here's the mental model I want you to hold for the whole video. A glass of water is nothing. A swimming pool is heavy but harmless. The danger is depth. Because the deeper you go, the harder the water pushes. Every layer above is pressing down on the layer below. So pressure climbs the further you sink, in a straight line, all the way to the floor. That's why every big dam is the same shape, a wedge. Thin at the top, where the water barely leans, and monstrously thick at the bottom, where it's trying to push the whole wall over. Once you see the wedge, you understand the entire problem. The dam isn't fighting the lake. It's fighting the bottom of the lake. And now the fact that breaks everyone's intuition. Ask most people what a dam is fighting, and they'll say, the lake. All that water stretching back for miles. Surely the bigger the lake, the harder the job. It's completely wrong. The force trying to topple a dam doesn't care how big the reservoir is. It only cares how deep it is at the wall. The horizontal force on a dam scales with the square of the water depth and is independent of how far the reservoir extends. Basic hydrostatics. F is proportional to H superscript 2. Read that again. A pond 50 meters deep and a 100-mile lake 50 meters deep push on the wall with exactly the same force. The miles of water behind don't add a single pound. It feels impossible, but think about why. Pressure at any point underwater depends only on the height of the column directly above it. The waterway out near the far shore isn't stacked over the dam. It's stacked over the lakebed out there. So the wall feels the column right in front of it, and nothing else. The lake can be the size of a country. What's crushing the dam is just the few hundred meters of height at its foot. This is the first thing that makes dams feel like a trick. We picture them straining against a vast weight of water. They're actually straining against a number you can write on a napkin, depth squared. And because it's the square, going twice as deep doesn't double the force, it quadruples it. Which is exactly why the tallest dams are the terrifying ones, and why a modest extra height costs you so much wall. The volume is the spectacle. The depth is the danger. So if depth is the enemy, how do you actually beat it? There are really only three answers, and every great dam on Earth is one of them. Answer 1, brute force. The gravity dam. Just build a wall so heavy the water can't shove it. A gravity dam resists the water purely through its own weight and the friction of its base on the rock. It's a mountain of concrete sitting on bedrock, and the only thing holding it down is how much it weighs. Crude, expensive, unkillable. Answer 2, and this is the elegant one, the arch dam. Don't fight the water, redirect it. You curve the wall toward the lake, like a bow. When the water pushes, the arch transfers that load sideways as horizontal thrust into the canyon walls, the abutments, rather than trying to tip the wall over. Arch dams are the thinnest type for this reason. The harder the water pushes, the tighter the arch jams into the rock. It uses the attack to make itself stronger. That's why arch dams can be shockingly thin. They're barely holding the water at all. They're handing its force to the mountain and letting the mountain do the holding. Answer 3, the clever compromise, the buttress dam. A thinner sloped wall on the water side, propped up from behind by a row of angled fins, like flying buttresses on a cathedral, but in reverse. Buttress dams use a watertight upstream face supported by downstream buttresses that carry the load to the foundation, using far less material than a solid gravity dam. It's the same idea a Gothic builder used to hold up a stone roof. Channel the load down into specific, strong points instead of one heavy mass. And here's the architect's read. The wall you photograph isn't a wall at all. It's a diagram of where the force is going, straight down into bedrock, sideways into a canyon, or split down a row of fins. Same job. 3 completely different conversations with the same impossible weight. Now here's a force almost nobody pictures, and it's the one that quietly terrifies dam engineers. We've been talking about water pushing sideways on the wall, but water doesn't stop at the face of the dam. It seeps down into the rock and the joints beneath the foundation. And once it's under there, all that pressure starts pushing upward against the bottom of the dam. Uplift is the upward water pressure that develops in the foundation and at the base of a concrete dam from seepage beneath it. It directly reduces the dam's effective weight and its resistance to sliding. Think about what that means. We build a gravity dam to win by sheer weight, a mountain of concrete pinning itself to bedrock. And the water answers by trying to float it. It gets underneath and presses up, canceling out some of the very weight we were relying on. Get the numbers wrong, and the dam can slide or tip on a cushion of water it's standing on without anyone seeing a drop. So how do you fight a force you can't see? You go to war underground. Engineers inject a grout curtain, a wall of cement pumped into boreholes drilled into the foundation rock, to cut the seepage paths, and drill drainage holes from a gallery inside the dam to relieve the pressure that gets through. There is a tunnel running through the inside of most big dams whose entire job is to bleed off the water pressure, trying to lift the structure off the planet. And this is the architect's read I love about uplift. The most dangerous load on a dam isn't the spectacular wall of water everyone photographs. It's the invisible water you can't even see, patiently getting underneath the one thing holding the whole valley back. Let me make that pressure real with the most famous wall in the world. At the foot of the Hoover Dam, under about 715 feet, 220 m of water, the pressure reaches roughly 310 pounds per square inch. That's enough to crush a submarine. Every square inch of the lower wall is taking that, and there are millions of square inches. So Hoover is built like the wedge we drew, 660 feet thick at its base, tapering to just 45 feet at the crest, where the water barely pushes at all. But Hoover hides a second, stranger problem, one that has nothing to do with the lake, and everything to do with the sheer mass of the wall. Hoover used about 3.25 million cubic yards of concrete. Concrete doesn't just dry, it cooks. As it cures, it gives off heat, and a block this enormous would trap that heat inside. Poured as one solid mass, the heat of curing would have taken roughly 125 years to dissipate, and the uneven cooling would have cracked the dam apart. So they didn't build one wall. They built it as separate blocks, and threaded more than 580 miles of thin steel pipe through the concrete, pumping first river water and then refrigerated water through it to pull the heat out as it set. And no, despite the famous story, the concrete isn't still curing today. Cores tested in 1995 showed it long since cured and still slowly gaining strength. The mass was so great we had to actively air condition a mountain of concrete from the inside, just to stop the wall cooking itself to pieces before the water ever arrived. Now scale that up to the largest body of water humans have ever deliberately trapped, and watch the danger change from pressure into mass. On the Zambezi, between Zambia and Zimbabwe, the Kariba Dam holds back Lake Kariba, about 185 cubic kilometers of water, roughly 4 times the Three Gorges reservoir. Water weighs a ton per cubic meter, so that's on the order of 180 billion tons, pressed into one valley. Not pushing on a wall now, just sitting on the crust. And the crust felt it. Here's the mechanism, because it's stranger than heavy thing presses down. When you load that much weight onto the ground, 2 things happen. The sheer pressure squeezes the rock, and the water seeps down into the cracks and faults beneath the reservoir, raising the pressure inside the rock and prying those faults apart, lubricating them so they slip more easily. Reservoir-induced seismicity is driven by both the added load and increased pore water pressure on subsurface faults. It's called reservoir-induced seismicity, and at Kariba, as the lake filled, instruments logged thousands of tremors over the first few years of filling, including events above magnitude 6. Read that again. We didn't just store water. We pushed on a fault until it moved. The reservoir made its own earthquakes. And Kariba isn't even the cleanest case. The textbook one is in India, the Koyna Dam, where in December 1967 a magnitude 6.6 earthquake, older catalogs say 6.3, killed around 177 to 180 people and injured over 2,000. The dam itself survived with cracks. It is the most powerful quake ever linked to a reservoir. And I'll be honest, the link is still argued. Officials disputed it for years. Attribution to reservoir-induced seismicity is debated but widely accepted in the literature. But the ground beneath Koyna has kept shaking for over 50 years. Hundreds of small quakes a year are still recorded beneath the Koyna Warner reservoirs. We filled a valley, and the valley has been answering ever since. Although, and this is the catch hiding in every biggest dam headline, largest depends entirely on how you count. Kariba holds the most water by volume. But ask which reservoir is largest by surface area, and the crown jumps to Ghana. Lake Volta, behind the Akasambo Dam, spreads across about 8,500 square kilometers, roughly 3.5% of an entire country, turned into a lake. Same word, largest, two completely different reservoirs. One deep and concentrated, leaning hard on a wall. One vast and shallow, leaning gently on a whole landscape. And remember what we proved earlier. The deep, concentrated one is the dangerous one to hold, even though the shallow one looks bigger on a map. As an architect, I love that, because it's the honest catch in every superlative. The biggest dam is just whichever measure you decided to win on before you started counting. Volume, surface, height, power. Pick your ruler, and you pick your champion. Which brings us to the one you've definitely seen a wild claim about. China's Three Gorges Dam holds a smaller reservoir than Kariba, but it does something none of the others do. It lifted around 40 cubic kilometers of water up about 175 meters into the hills. And moving that much mass that far, upward and outward from the planet's center, genuinely changes how the Earth spins. Here's the physics, and it's beautiful. Picture a figure skater spinning, then pulling their arms in. They speed up because they've pulled mass closer to their axis. Three Gorges did the opposite. It pushed a huge mass outward, which makes the planet spin a hair slower, exactly like the skater throwing their arms wide. Shifting mass outward increases Earth's moment of inertia, slightly slowing rotation. And in 2005, two NASA geophysicists actually ran the numbers. So how much did we slow the Earth? Brace yourself. Filling the reservoir lengthens the day by about 0.06 microseconds and shifts the pole by roughly 2 centimeters. That is 60 billionths of a second, and a pole shift you could cover with your hand. So here's where I have to play sanity checker, because this is exactly the kind of fact that gets twisted online. Yes, a dam measurably slowed the Earth and nudged its pole. That is a real, calculated, published fact. But the viral version, China shifted the Earth's axis, is nonsense dressed up as physics. A 2-centimeter wobble on a planet 12,000 kilometers across is not shifting the axis. The moon's tidal braking slows Earth far more, on the order of milliseconds per century, thousands of times the dam's effect. The honest version is somehow more impressive. We built something so heavy that the maths of planetary rotation had to account for it, by an amount no clock will ever feel. A true fact, wrapped in a wildly oversold story. Exactly the kind we're here to separate. And finally, the one that should change how you see every dam in this video. Because here's the dark secret of the whole field. Most dams that kill people don't kill them by breaking. Think about what we've built up. The wall is engineered, calculated, inspected, overbuilt. But the wall is only one of the things that has to hold. The rock it's anchored to has to hold. The hillsides around the lake have to hold. And the water has to actually go where you tell it. When dams do fail, the two leading causes are overtopping, water going over the top, and internal erosion, or piping, where seepage carves a hidden channel through the dam or its foundation from the inside. Piping alone accounts for roughly a fifth of U.S. dam failures, and overtopping for a large share of the rest. In other words, the water usually wins by going around or through the engineering, not by knocking the wall down. And piping is the nightmare, because it's invisible. The same seepage that drives uplift can quietly wash fine soil out of an earthen dam, growing a tunnel from the inside until the wall above it simply drops into the hole. The dam looks perfect right up to the second it isn't. Take the worst disaster of them all. In 1975, China's Banqiao Dam didn't crack, didn't crumble. A typhoon dumped a year's worth of rain in a day. The reservoir rose, and the water simply rose over the top of the wall. Banqiao was overtopped during Typhoon Nina in August 1975, triggering a cascade in which 62 dams failed. 62 dams, falling like dominoes, that tens of thousands drowned immediately, around 26,000, with total deaths including the following famine and disease estimated far higher, up to roughly 150,000 or more. Estimates vary widely. The structures were beaten not by weak walls, but by water that wouldn't fit. And then there's the one that haunts me most, because the dam was perfect. In the Italian Alps, the Vajont Dam was a triumph. One of the tallest in the world, a slim concrete arch built to take colossal pressure. And it worked. The wall never failed. Not then, not since. But on the 9th of October, 1963, an entire face of the mountain beside the reservoir, around 260 million cubic meters of rock, tore loose and slid into the water. The lake had nowhere to go but up. A wave over 150 meters tall leapt clean over the top of the dam and fell on the towns below. Around 2,000 people died in minutes. And the dam? It's still standing today, almost untouched. That's the lesson that should sit with you. The danger was never only the wall. You can build a flawless dam, and the water you trap behind it will still, patiently, find a way to win. So what is a dam really? It's the most weight we ever dare to stack in one place. And the wall, the part we photograph, is almost the easy bit. Everything that matters is what the water does once it's up there. It crushes, so we shape walls into wedges and arches to hand its force to bedrock and mountains. It gets underneath and tries to lift the whole structure off the planet, so we drill curtains and tunnels just to bleed the pressure away. It cares only about depth, not size, so the deepest reservoirs are the dangerous ones, even when a shallow one looks bigger. It weighs enough to pry open faults and shake out earthquakes, at Kariba, at Koyna, again and again. It holds enough mass to tug, faintly, on the spin of the whole planet. And it never, ever stops looking for the way down, over the top, through the rock, around the edges. We don't really hold water back. We strike a deal with it. The wall, the rock, the ground, the weather, all holding at once. And then we spend forever making sure every part of. Here's what I keep coming back to. Every dam is a bet that the wall, the rock, and the ground all hold, every second, for centuries. Most of them win it. But the water is patient, and it is heavy, and it is always, quietly, leaning. Once you've seen the wedge and the arch and the weight behind it, you can't unsee it. You'll spot the physics in every wall you ever stand under. I'm an architect, and I make these because the honest version of how the world is built is always stranger than the myth. If that's your kind of thing, Stick around. There's a whole channel of it. I'll see you in the next one.